the military architecture structure at the top, with the removal of the former service chiefs and reinstatement of some service chiefs, and others were promoted, like the former chief of army staff was promoted to chief of defense staff, and then the chief of defense intelligence maintained his position. And all of that move seemed like the president knew exactly what the country needed at the time, and it happened just before we started having this surge in kidnappings and abductions all over the country. And now we are seeing yet another strategic move, from the quarters of the president, his decision to appoint former CDS Musa as the new minister for defense. What is your position on all of this? And do you think that indeed the president's actions are in line with the fight against insecurity to bring it to an end?
I would describe the appointment as putting a round peg in a round hole.
Okay.
First of all, if you look at the fact that the proposed Minister of Defense comes from the north,
Yeah.
the area where we have had most of the problems with insecurity, it is good that somebody who knows the terrain, who is familiar with the people, the problems, the lapses, should be in the position to tackle those challenges better. And I think for me, even the language will make it easier for him to be able to interface with the people as well as with the men on ground. We talk about using non-kinetic, tactics to solve insecurity. I think he is the one person who would be able, drawing from his experience and then adding to the fact that he is able to have a very smooth rapport with the people in the places where insecurity is at its best.
Yeah.
I think we should have very good results coming from that appointment.
But in as much as it's important to note that the former CDS, now Minister for Defense designate, in the person of General Christopher Musa, is from Kaduna State. But it's also important to note that the former Minister for Defense, Mohammed Badaru, is also from the north. The
Absolutely.
the Minister of State for Defense, talking about Matawale, was the governor of Zamfara State at some point, and then now Minister of State for Defense. So it has always revolved around individuals who are either from the north central or from the northwest.
Yeah, I agree
Yet we
with you.
continue to see this happenings time and time again.
Yeah, I agree with you that in the past we've had people from that area. But what I'm saying, though, is that it is good that he equally is from the north, because I see, for me, I would think that if he brought in somebody from the south, or from the east or something, or from the west, they would first have to, acclimatize with the area, the terrain, learn the language, probably. I just think it is more acceptable that we have somebody who is equally from the north moving to fill that position. And again, remember that as Chief of Defense Staff, he had a full brief on what the situation was, and he's very familiar with the areas where the non-state actors have pitched their tent, and probably would have informants, because that is how it works within the security architecture. He should have people on ground, on place already, that he can draw or he can fall back on to give him the necessary support to carry out his responsibility. So for me, I think there would have been no better person to step into those shoes than the present nominee that we have.
Well, interesting take there from Francisca. I think at this point we have our guest joining us virtually, Dr. Aliu Elias, the MD, CSA Advisory, and also an economist, joining us this morning. A very good morning to you, Dr. Aliu. Thank you so much for joining the show, Morning Express.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's delve right into it. I was just having a discussion with my colleague here in the studio, my co-host, and we were talking about the charge that the president had given to the service chiefs. Now, it appears that the president, from time to time, makes these pronouncements to service chiefs: ensure you bring an end to insecurity, ensure that you crush the bandits, the crackdown on insecurity should be intensified and all. However, how much more do we need to hear these things being said until we start seeing results? Because almost on a daily basis, Nigerians wake up to hear that people have been abducted in either their villages or commuters have been abducted on the highways. What is your take on this?
All right. I actually follow and listen to your conversation with Francisca. I think it's a good point and valid information we've shared. However, the fact remains that I don't know when we began to fix people at the appropriate place. You recall that Badaru was the governor of Jigawa, Matawali was governor of Samfara. But if you look at military way of doing things, they actually like to have their superior who have the understanding of what is going on, who they can always say yes sir to. Because sometimes when the civilian is giving them an advice, they will be thinking the operational logistics that's actually happening in the field may not be clear to the minister because he's a civilian. But now that the government have decided to nominate the former CDS, I think it's a good one. From different sources, we got to know maybe the condition for maybe foreign support and other things. But be that and it may, I think it's a good one. And we want to challenge the CDS, former CDS himself. You understand the terrain, like you rightly mentioned in the studio. He has been in the forefront of the war. So we should also give him a kind of timeline because you recall that most times they give them timeline to achieve A, B, and C. But at this point in time, everything is under their purview now. The minister is a immediate past CDS, so he understand and we think he will charge his people more in terms of welfare. He actually know what they actually needed. He's going to request for it. In terms of the operational logistics, he has been into the operation himself. Will be able to provide the right thing. I think the president have scored a good score for choosing him as the as the minister. However, there's a lot of discussion concerning that the former minister resigned the condition of house issue. I think sometimes we need to come clean. If we are actually changing the minister because we want a stronger military strength or what have you, we should come clean that he is even resigning because of that. I think Nigeria will appreciate that more and will believe that this is a good one in the right direction. So I
Now,
think we
Dr.
should come
Aliu,
out clean.
some people might say that the reason why oftentimes you find people in such positions of power resigning based on questionable health reasons is so that they don't appear as incompetent or go out in an embarrassing manner. So it's more like a soft landing for them. So it appears now like, oh, they are leaving not because they couldn't execute their duties properly, but because of circumstances beyond their control. In this case now, an alien health situation for the former Minister of Defense.
Well, like I said, sometimes we need to be straightforward. I recall the former PDP chairman, uh, the former Kano State Ganduje, actually also resigned on the issue of health. And we've seen him going to different programs, and we later see his appointment as chairman of one of the board. Now, if he had come out, I think it would be much more honorable that even in other country, when there is war and when there's such issues and people discover that they have been there for a year, 2 years and nothing positive is happening, they will honorably resign. So there's no need for us to be painting it that it's because of A or because of B. You resign because we want to strengthen the military. Simple as that. That's my own view anyway.
Yeah, your opinion is very valid, but I also do think that health challenges are relative. So somebody you see on the street carrying out responsibilities because he has to might actually have some underlying health factors that may not put the person in the best position to carry out his duties as effectively at the time. But away from health and such challenges, let's look at the vow to transform unstable zones into hubs of economic activity. It's been a couple of years since people in the north have had to run away from their farmlands. We've seen reduced agricultural activity. We've seen a whole lot go wrong in terms of agriculture and commerce in the areas where we have insecurity, including the central Benue State, where we have most of the people unable to go to their farms because of the header farmer crisis. Now, this vow to transform unstable zones to hubs of economic activity, how realistic do you think this is?
But we've seen different efforts of government. I recall because they are issued in Sambisa, the government may decide to put a military university called is it military. There's one in military university in that area because they want to make sure that that place becomes much more stable. But stability has to do with the practical effort of the federal government. We must solve the underlying issue of the headers farmer crisis in case of the issue of when you look at Benue. We must also solve the communal clashes that we have when you talked about Jos, Plateau State. If we also talk about Sokoto, Kebbi, you must also look at that critically. I actually, about 2 weeks ago, I passed through uh, Abuja to Kano by road. Then I also passed through Kano to Sokoto by road and Sokoto to Abuja by road. I saw a lot of things that, when you do not see the practical thing, it will be difficult for you to actually believe some things. While I passed through Sokoto along Musa, I saw group of people are carrying out mining activities, not even one, not two, not three, in hundreds. I will say we want to stop those things. Until we stop those things, that's when we can actually reduce those problems. And until we stop all those things that are trigger, that are precursor for the problem we are seeing, until we solve the actual problem, there is no investment. There is no business that will go and invest in a volatile area. Except those people that want to take advantage of the insecurity to make money, like illegal activities in that area. So for us to make sure that logistics and supply chain issue flows in those areas, we must do the necessary things and we must assure you that yes, in fact, while I was passing through Sokoto to Abuja, I can tell you there's some area. In fact, let me tell you this: I have to follow government's own vehicle. While moving from Kano to Sokoto, I followed Kano line, and while moving from Sokoto to Abuja, I also follow Sokoto Transport Authority. And I can tell you, when I go to that where I queue, I can tell you I was like number 100 and something with people that queue. That simply means that people have identified that you cannot go with other vehicle except government vehicle, and that has actually crippled economic activities in that area. So bringing that into your question now, if people do not have confidence in passing those roads, people do not have confidence in using their vehicle, I can also tell you that along when I was moving, you hardly see other vehicles moving, on that road. That simply means the economic activities there will remain challenging until things actually fix. So we must fix and do the needful and bring people's confidence before we can see economic activities happening in this area. In fact, I actually went there with him that we are going to organize a conference in Sokoto between 18th to 21st. We have to cancel it because while I go there to see things that are happening, we have to look at it holistically among all of us that went that this place for now is not good to risk people's life, about 500 people's life coming to this axis. And that would have bring an economic positivity into that area in terms of hotels, in terms of bringing much more commerce to that area. So it's a serious challenge for that area.
All right, Dr. Aliu, let's move on to yet another matter in the news this morning. It's concerning state policing and calls that have been made by the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, governors of the southwestern states. And much recently, we have seen governors of the 19 northern states also throwing their weight behind the creation of state police in the country. We hear that the House of Representatives is set to debate that today, and alongside other constitution review bills. However, what is your position? I know you have spoken about this time and time again, but do you think that at a time like this, the creation of state policing in different states would go a long way in solving this age-long debacle of insecurity in the country?
Right. So I think when you are talking about state police, there are some critical stakeholders that I expect them to have been engaged, and I expect them to come out and speak in one voice. The most critical people there are the state governments. So I expect them to state governors forum and say yes, we are ready and we agree with it. Because if you look at it, they may not come out to say it. People are thinking that state governors are going to abuse such thing, and it's becoming what we have overflowed over time. So for me, I think there is need to have state police as soon as possible. Like we rightly said, that it's people within that terrain that understand. You could see the benefit of having a Amotekun in those areas. Amotekun has solved a lot of problems. You also see that South our West governors have also come together and said their advisors, SA security, should come together and provide fund. So I expect all of us to go stop even looking at it from that perspective and come together and say yes, it is a high time. So I'm hoping by the time you discuss it in the assembly, it will be positive. Remember, beyond discussing in assembly, state assembly also have to put their own input. So I think all of us together, we should all agree that at this point in time, the solution that can bring us security as expected is to have state-owned security. I think it's the right time to have that now.
Okay. Now let's look at non-state actors who have been able to, carve niches for themselves in areas where we would not like for them to be. How do you think this state policing would help to recover territory, as it were, or to give a stronger presence in those areas for constituted authority?
Right. So non-state actors are taking advantage of the security gap and ungoverned space. So if there is a state police, remember these people will be in a particular community and they would have understand the terrain. They, in fact, by face, they will identify that you are from where. I recall during a particular time in Lagos, during the time of I don't want to mention the those people now. Anytime we are coming to our area, they'll be looking at faces. They'll say, "You, we've not seen you before. So who are you here to see? What are you here to do?" You know, by the time you have that level of consciousness in Nigerian citizen, and people get to know who is who, and they actually stand for what they're actually coming to do, I think that will solve the problem. So having state police would have reduced the opportunity that the non-state actor is taking advantage of.
Well, interesting take. But another angle of this, Dr. Aliu, is from the economic part of it, where some persons are concerned that certain state governors might not have the necessary funding to be able to uphold the state policing structures in their state. Mind you, the Yamotekun Corps in the southwest has been doing fantastically well. We have seen the Ebubago in the southeast also doing their own beat, but not entirely spread across the southeast. And we also have the Hizbah police in places like Kano and the rest, which is under scrutiny right now. We hear that that U.S. lawmakers are calling for, a disbandment of the Hizbah police. But do you think that with these structures that have been test run for some time, it's possible to have all of the states create their own policing structures and also fund them financially to be able to function properly?
Well, I don't think we have issue with funding now because I see we are actually looking at the problem before we even start. You know, each state will have to employ what they can actually manage now. Nothing stop them from starting from 1,000 or 500. They are not saying you should start from maybe 10,000. Depends on your state capacity. And I can tell you at this point in time, according to the federal government, there's more money. Before they share 600 billion, now they are sharing about 2.3 trillion. That simply means that then government can also, federal government can also create a coffer, a kind of funding that will enable them to actually do that. I can tell you, if there is no security, economic activities will continue to be crippled. So we must look at it as a necessity, not something you have choice to not to have. So I think you can even start from 300, 500. By the time you start doing that, you grow in it and see how to solve it. I don't think we have issue of funding. The fear is that issue of abusing our state police.
Okay, now let's look at citizenship involvement in security issues. We've had the military go out there, we've had the normal security architecture in place, and if we say that bringing in, state policing and all of that is going to bring improvement because they are closer to the people, would you say that the citizens themselves have done enough, as it were, to enhance the activities of the security personnel we've had operating in those areas in the past?
I can tell you when we measure the degree of responsiveness to citizens in terms of security, I can say it's very, very low because most time we need to be proactive as citizens too. It is when we escalate. Police are not they are not angel that will be everywhere. Sometimes when you get to see something, like they normally say, see something and say something. We must also have the onus is also on us as citizens that when we notice something that is going wrong, we should be able to call. Then our police need to also be responsive. The major problem we are having now is the issue of having command from the national. That is, when the state governor even need to deploy police to a particular community, the state governor need to call the commissioner. The commissioner need to escalate down to the, IG before they get that command. That's the major problem that I think the policing side is actually having, because even though the citizen try to escalate to actually, prompt the police to for a particular suspect or what have you, the process of notifying them and achieving that is the problem. So I think citizens we must also be responsive and do our own deeds to actually call on security agents when we see something that is a bit worrying.
All right, Dr. Aliu, we hear that U.S. lawmakers and Nigerian reps are set to hold fresh sessions to deliberate on the security situation in the country, but also returning the matter to this alleged Christian genocide. U.S. lawmakers are disagreeing with the federal government, and they say that steps taken so far by the FG to end insurgency or to deal with the problem is quite insufficient. What is your position on this? The fact that despite all the efforts that we see the federal government making to, jointly end insurgency, we're getting comments like this from U.S. lawmakers.
Well, I will, as a Nigerian, I would say the effort is not sufficient. I will join them to say that, because you measure achievements with results. If you look at our budgetary allocation for the past 7 years, it's clear that we spend more on the military to be sure that they are able to cope this issue of insurgency. But behold, it's getting much more worse. So for me, I think it's not sufficient, and that's why I said we do not have issue with US coming to support us, but for them to be reducing us, for them to be saying there's a genocide, for them to be looking at things from different perspectives are a problem. If they say it's insufficient, let them bring their technology, their military designs and what have you to actually join us to solve the problem. For me, it is not sufficient. The sufficient will have peace. The sufficient not central will be a place that we can actually move around. If it's sufficient, the northwest will not be a problem. If it's sufficient, we will not have pocket of the kidnapping in Kwara and in other places. So I think we need to do more. I agree with them that it's not sufficient. So they should do more. I'm sure that that's part of their suggestion, and that's why we see that the minister is being changed and a lot of things is happening. So I think it's a statement that we will agree with. But for them to say there's genocide of the particular religion, for them to say we are a disgraced country, these are the things I think we will not agree with them on.
Okay, so talking about doing more now, in retrospect, having been somebody that's on ground with the situation, what is the more that you think we should be able to achieve given the intervention from the US?
Right, the more we actually needed is much more of intelligence. We have been talking about non-kinetic, and my own non-kinetic is not giving amnesty to uh, uh, engaging the traditional rulers, engaging the community. When you engage the community, the traditional ruler, I think that would have helped to solve a lot of problems, because people in this community know what's actually happening. So if they have a way of escalating, of telling people, I think that will help. The other thing is that,
Hello, Dr. Aliu. Well, it may seem we are having a bit of trouble with that connection there.
Across. So I think it's important that we look at that our policing system. I'm sure that police are much more strengthened to do much more findings, much of underground check to know, so they can actually be proactive to take all this attack before it actually happens.
Well, interesting take there, Dr. Aliu. It's important that while we also advocate for state policing, we should also be asking very important questions. Why do you think there was this sudden surge in activities of Boko Haram terrorists and bandits in different parts of the country. In the last 1 month or so, we have seen attacks happening in places like Kwara, Kebbi, Kano, Kogi, Borno, Sokoto, Zamfara, Katsina, you name it. And all of these attacks have been abductions for ransom. Why do you think there was this sudden surge in such activities?
Right. So if you ask me, uh, law taking its course, because if the law is taking its course, I wouldn't have such thing. So if a bandit or a kidnapper is being arrested, let the person face the wrath of the law. Anybody that's involved close financial should take the wrath of the law. And I'll give you a quick example. People that adopted Maga as students in Kebbi, people that adopt people in back that adopt people in Kwara, Eruku, to be specific.
Yeah.
What is their condition now? Government also is not coming clean in the sense that they're not coming clean in the sense that why you don't tell Nigeria about what happened. Are you seeing that you negotiate with the kidnappers and they just release those people? Are you seeing there is no ransom being paid? If you engage them in a serious battle, why have we not seen those people, breathing, maybe you shot one of them, if there's a fight, we are not clear with what. So if you are giving them ransom, that simply means you are emboldening them the more. So the emboldenment is my major problem. Anybody that commits crime, crime happens anywhere. But the problem is that what happens after the crime has been committed, how you bring them to book, how they face the wrath of the law, that's what will make other people not to engage in that. So with what happened in Maga and Eruku, is actually emboldening people to go back into that commercial kidnapping, that I think they are embarking on. So I think law should take its course at every point in time.
Okay, so now we have an interesting situation on the new telegraph where it says Cross River panic as armed headers allegedly invade Catholic school in Bekwara local government area. Now these are areas in the south that have seen little or how do I call it, insignificant threats of insecurity in the past. So it would appear that the security situation is gradually spreading even to areas where we would have said are relatively safe. What do you think communities should do ahead of such threats emerging in their areas? Because with what we see now, without trying to be pessimistic, it would appear that the people are spreading their tentacles to other areas. So what do you think should be proactive steps taken by communities to forestall such spread?
Right. So for me, I want us to actually look at it from this perspective. Criminality does not have tribe, color, or religion. Criminal is criminal. So I want us to be very careful that when attack happen in any way, we now quickly said is from this perspective. There could be criminal around the community itself. So I think community should also have an open mind that when there's criminal, they should be able to find out how and who is behind it. Sometimes, those criminals who disguise as if they are from a particular part of the country and they are actually from that area causing mayhem. So I think community also should be alert, and make sure that they make their findings. And that's why I talked about arrest, try people and make sure that they bring them to book. Because by arresting them, engaging them in, make sure that you actually bring them to book. We unveil, which shows that where are these people actually coming from. We are agreed that in North Central we have issues of, farmer seders crisis. In the north we agree that maybe mining and co is causing the problem. But in the south for that matter, I think there needs to do a thorough findings of what is bringing about that crisis.
All right, Dr. Aliu, we have just about a little below 5 minutes to wrap up the discussion on Morning Express, but let's revisit the nomination of former Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher Musa by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for the position of Minister of Defense. And we hear that the Senate is set to screen him today. In looking at this new position, what do you think the former CDS, who will now be Chief of Minister of Defense, will do differently to curb the insecurity in the country and at least bring it to a reasonable level?
Well, I'm very, very optimistic and I'm convinced it's going to bring a lot of morale to his people because, when you are one of them, you are now the leader, You are going to bring a serious morale. You are not telling them to do what you have not done differently. But if the civilian is telling the military that go and comb that area, you may not understand the logistic side of it. So because the former CDS understand it, it will actually make sure that federal government provide the requisites, what they actually need to actually embark on that. These are the things. Perhaps look at the general that lost his life. General Musa also. They would have known the error that made him to actually lost his life because it's a calculative error. Because I heard he actually went around with a bike, so they would have prepared maybe air surveillance on his head, so that if there's any attack, they could actually see. So I think he's going to do something different. The morale is going to be different. The tactics is going to be different. The logistics is going to be different. I think that's the thing that General Christopher Musa is going to bring.
Okay, so all of this is coming at the Yuletide season, a season that is normally prone to security issues. What would be your last word to Nigerians concerning how to comport ourselves within this period to stay safe?
Right, I think Yuletide is much more of a southwest, maybe middle belt. But Yuletide generally, though not, you see also the mixture of it there. The thing is, let us all be careful at what we do. We must not move in the dead of the night because I saw that's what actually happening. So we must also get people informed when we are moving, and we must be conscious of our security. As citizens of Nigeria, we like to move freely, but this time called for another, attention, another planning that is different from what we've been saying. So I think the major thing as a civilian, what I would advise people is to make sure that they move during the day, not in the dead of the night, and you should avoid a silent and lonely road.
All right, Dr. Aliyu Elias, we must thank you so much. This has been a very interesting discussion with you on Morning Express. Always a pleasure, and we wish you the very best of the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Good morning,
you.
Nigerians.
Well, I have been speaking to Dr. Aliyu Elias, an economist and MD, CSA Advisory. We've been talking security matters and the most recent nomination made by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for the Minister of Defense.